Hey everybody, it's Candy, aka Brown Eyed Girl 69. How y'all doing? Well, today is Monday, September 30th. It's approximately late in the afternoon. And I'm getting ready to read another chapter out of Mr. Wolf and Me. This chapter is about Sheriff Cravens. This is chapter 4. You can always tell when a stranger is outside our schoolroom. A big rustling starts up at the front of the room, and the kids up there start growing giraffe necks that sway back and forth as they strain to peer out through the half glass in the door. I'm usually as nosy as the next guy, but when they started peering and straining in math class that Friday, I didn't pay any attention. To be honest, I was having trouble getting my attention on anything but my own thoughts that day. The whole night before had been a long nightmare. Mr. Wolf slept on his rug in my room as usual, but he whimpered softly every once in a while all night long. I kept getting up to tell him he was going to be all right, and then by the time I settled back to sleep, he would be whimpering again. I'm not used to being awake all night, and the sounds I heard really spooked me. I had recognized the cry of the owl after the first time or two, but I got tired of his calling to his friend and the low and mournful hoot of his friend's reply. The sound of the dog pack howling off in the far woods sent a chill up my spine, the way it always does. I've never seen those dogs, but I can imagine them with gleaming eyes and wide open dripping mouths like something out of a horror movie. But somehow the tapping bothered me the most. There was just enough wind, so the loose shutter outside the master bedroom window was tapping a signal once in a while, then stopping and starting again. I kept trying to remember Morse code as if the dots and dashes were giving me some sinister message about Mr. Wolf. In spite of Doc Fletcher's reassurances and Mom's optimism, it was hard for me to feel that Mr. Wolf was getting along as well as he should be. Not since that first day that I brought him home from the woods as a puppy had I ever seen him as listless. He hardly tried to raise his head when I spoke to him. He tried to wag his tail, but it was almost embarrassing what a bad job he made of it. Just a half-hearted little thump and then nothing. He would only open his eyes halfway, and they looked glazed, as if something hung there between him and me. Finally, I noticed that the giraffe necks up at the front of the room were looking back at me, and Matt Turpin was mouthing something and pointing his finger like a recruitment poster. I just shook my head at him. Whatever was in the hall didn't interest me. I just wanted this stupid day to get itself over with so I could go see how Mr. Wolf was getting along. Finally, Mr. Elroy went outside to check. When he came back in, he motioned me up front. I knew something terrible was going on when I saw my mom out there, still wearing her mourning face and standing beside Sheriff Cravens like she was a prisoner or something. Whatever was going on had to be pretty big stuff. Nothing gets my mother out of bed early in the morning. By the time I was in kindergarten, I knew better than to say word number one to her at the beginning of the day. My own theory is that her real personality freezes in the night and has to be thawed out with coffee in the morning. I shut the door behind me quick, halfway hoping I'd catch somebody's long nose in it. Then I whispered, "What do you do, Mom?" "What did you do, Mom?" From the way her eyes widened and her mouth dropped, I knew she was still about 3 cups of coffee away from being ready for all this. "What did I do?" she squalled. "What kind of question is that?" Sheriff Cravens grew up in this town just like Mom and Dad both did. Maybe he knew well enough to try to protect her more than himself. Anyways, he spoke up quickly. "I asked your mom to come down with me, Miles." Then after a furtive glance at her, he went on, "I know it was a big inconvenience, but I wanted her along when I came to talk to you." "But I haven't done anything either," I told him quickly. "There is something about the light reflection off the buttons of a law officer's uniform and makes your life flash before your eyes. Every rock I'd ever thrown, every mustache I'd painted on a candidate's picture, every rotten apple I'd ever hidden in a school bus seat swam before my eyes, and I was ready to confess to anything. I know that, Miles, he said reassuringly. I just came over to hear your story of how that German Shepherd of yours got all cut up last night. I told Mom already, I said, glancing at her. From the close look on her face, I couldn't tell whether she was just staying out of this on principle or because it's still too early in the morning. So I repeated about going up to Pin Hill for the nuts and about the fight and how Doc Fletcher had sewed Mr. Wolf back up. And nobody else was there, he asked. I wish there had been, I said. I really needed help. Then he stood very still, staring at that bulletin board where the school posts all the rules of what you aren't allowed to do. Down at the bottom, some comedian had added a handwritten line that read, breathe in or out. I suddenly realized that I was having a little trouble doing that myself. What's all this about Mr. Wolf? I asked, unable to wait any longer without exploding inside. He shook his head unhappily. I don't know whether 8th graders read the papers or not, but you must have heard about how those wild dog packs have been killing stock all over the country the past few years. Mr. Wolf is no wild running dog, I said. Well, I hope not, he replied, not meeting my eyes. The Jordan Aggers had 5 lambs slaughtered by wild dogs yesterday afternoon late. The guard dog he keeps out there was pretty badly cut up, too. When Doc Fletcher came out to minister to the flock and Agger's dog, Doc commented to Jordan that he'd sewed up your dog right before he left the office. Seemed pretty much of a coincidence to Jordan. It wasn't Mr. Wolf that fought his dog or killed his sheep, I told him. I was with him all the time. Jordan claims he got a good look at the last dog of the pack to leave and he wants to come over and look at your animal. Well, let him come, I said, feeling suddenly relieved. There isn't a German Shepherd anywhere around here that looks like my dog. He'll know right off that he's on the wrong track. I get home from school a little before 4 if he wants to come and get it over with. Sheriff Cravens hesitated. He intimated that he wanted to be sure that your father was there when he came. How about around 7? When I nodded, Sheriff Cravens kind of left Mom away while I just stood there. Jordan Aggers was just trying to be threatening by saying he wanted my dad to be there. He was going to feel pretty silly when he saw Mr. Wolf and had to admit he was 40 miles wrong about my dog. So where do you think the story will lead? Do you think Aggers, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think Jordan Aggers is going to come and present to Miles and his dad that evening concerning Mr. Wolf? I will say this, I already know how the story goes because I read it, but it's not nice, let's put it that way. So, until the next time, I will be on chapter 5 the next time, and that's going to be a return to Pin Hill, because basically Miles is going to be left having to prove that Mr. Wolf was not part of that wolf pack that killed Jordan Aggers' sheep. Peace, love, hugs, nugs.